It's strange how quickly your life can change from feeling completely normal to feeling like you're living in a horror movie. One minute, you're going about your day like anyone else, and the next, you're scared to close your eyes at night because of what might be waiting for you in the dark. I never thought of myself as someone who believed in the supernatural. Sure, I'd heard stories here and there, maybe watched the occasional ghost hunting show for fun, but I never believed any of it was real. That was until I moved into my new apartment. It was supposed to be an exciting time for me, my first place, all on my own. No roommates, no parents, just me and the freedom to do whatever I wanted. The apartment itself was nothing special, just a small one-bedroom unit in an older building. It had that kind of worn-down charm, you know? Squeaky floors, a few creaky doors, but nothing that seemed out of the ordinary. At least, not at first. In fact, when I first moved in, I thought the place was perfect. I loved the big windows that let in the sunlight during the day, and at night, the place felt cozy and safe. But that feeling didn't last long. The first few weeks were fine, but then strange things started happening. Small things, things that could easily be explained away. The kind of stuff that, if you told anyone else, they'd just laugh and say, "You're overreacting," or, "It's probably just the wind." But when it's happening to you, it's hard to ignore. It started with little noises in the night. I'd be in bed, drifting off to sleep, and I'd hear what sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the hallway outside my bedroom. I live alone, so you can imagine how unnerving that was. I'd get up, check the hall, but of course there was never anything there. At first I thought maybe it was the neighbors. I could hear them moving around sometimes, but these sounds were different. They weren't coming from the apartment next door. They were coming from inside my own home. I tried not to think too much of it. After all, old buildings creak, right? Pipes knock, floors settle. It's all perfectly normal. Or so I kept telling myself. But the noises didn't stop. In fact, they seemed to get worse. Every night, just as I was about to fall asleep, I'd hear that slow, deliberate creaking in the hallway. It started to feel like someone, or something, was walking just outside my door, waiting for me to notice. Then, the shadow appeared. The first time I saw it, I didn't even register it as something strange. I was getting ready for bed, brushing my teeth in the bathroom, and I saw a flicker of movement in the mirror. Just a quick, fleeting shadow at the edge of my vision, like someone had walked by the door. I turned around, expecting to see... I don't know, maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, but there was nothing. Just the empty hallway. I laughed it off. I'd been feeling jumpy because of the noises, and it was late. I figured I was just tired. But then it happened again, and again. Each time it was just a brief shadow. There 1 second, gone the next. And every time, it seemed to be just a little closer than before. The thing is, I wasn't scared at first. Not really. I kept telling myself it was all in my head, that I was just freaking myself out over nothing. But deep down, I could feel it. The growing unease, that sense that something was wrong. The shadow wasn't just a trick of the light. It was real. I could feel it. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, for no reason at all. I didn't hear a noise, didn't have a nightmare, but something pulled me out of sleep, and when I opened my eyes, I saw it. At the foot of my bed, just standing there in the dark, was the shadow. It wasn't moving, wasn't making a sound. It was just standing there, watching me. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I wanted to scream, to jump out of bed, to turn on the light, anything to make it go away. But I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, lying there with my eyes wide open, staring at this dark figure at the foot of my bed. It didn't feel like a person. It was too tall, too wrong. Its shape was vague, like it didn't quite belong in this world. I don't know how long I lay there, unable to move, staring at this thing in the darkness. It could have been minutes, or maybe just seconds, but it felt like an eternity. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. I blinked, and the shadow disappeared, leaving me in the cold, suffocating silence of my bedroom. I spent the rest of the night with the lights on, wide awake, my heart racing, trying to convince myself that it was just a nightmare. But it wasn't. I knew that deep down, even if I didn't want to admit it. After that night, things only got worse. After that first night, I tried to convince myself that what I saw was just a hallucination, maybe a trick of the light, or a shadow cast by something in my room. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. The shadow wasn't something my mind had made up. It was real, and unfortunately, it wasn't going away. Over the next few days, I noticed that things around my apartment felt off. The atmosphere was different, almost heavier. The air felt thick, and there was this constant sense of unease, like I was being watched. I started to avoid my bedroom as much as possible, spending more time in the living room or out of the apartment altogether, but I couldn't avoid sleeping forever. The nights got worse. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to stay awake as long as I could. But eventually, sleep would come, and so would the shadow. It wasn't every night at first. Some nights I'd wake up and feel that same sense of dread, but wouldn't see anything. Other nights I'd catch a glimpse of movement near the far corner of the room, but nothing clear enough to make out. But then it got bolder. One night, I woke up suddenly, feeling that familiar, cold sensation wash over me. My heart was pounding, and I knew, without even opening my eyes, that it was there. I could feel it, standing at the foot of my bed again, closer this time. With my eyes squeezed shut, I tried to will myself to stay calm, to not look. But after a few minutes of unbearable silence, I couldn't take it anymore. I opened my eyes. The shadow wasn't just at the foot of the bed this time. It was right beside me, looming over me, as if it had been watching me sleep the whole time. Its shape was still vague, just an outline of something that didn't quite belong in this world, but it was closer than it had ever been before. My breath caught in my throat, and I could barely move. It felt like every muscle in my body was locked in place. I don't know how long I lay there, paralyzed with fear, staring at this thing as it stood beside me. Seconds? Minutes? It felt like an eternity. I could feel its presence pressing down on me, almost suffocating me. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. After that, I started to sleep with the light on. It wasn't something I wanted to admit to anyone, but I was terrified of the dark now. The shadow seemed to thrive in it, and I figured if I could keep the room bright, it wouldn't be able to come back. For a while it worked, or at least I thought it did. I didn't see the shadow for a few nights, and I finally started to believe that maybe it had given up, or maybe it wasn't real at all. Maybe I really was losing my mind. But that hope didn't last long. About a week later, I woke up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, and the light in my room flickering. I stared at the lamp, watching as the bulb dimmed and brightened on its own, like something was messing with it. My chest tightened with fear, and I knew that whatever was in the room with me wasn't done. The shadow hadn't left. It was still here, and now it was angry. The light flickered out completely, and before I could react, I saw it, standing at the foot of my bed again. But this time it wasn't just one shadow. There were two, maybe three. The shapes were all different. One tall, one shorter, but they all had that same unnatural darkness, like they were holes in reality itself. My body went cold, and I felt a crushing weight on my chest. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I could only lie there, watching as these figures stood over me, their presence filling the room with a sense of malevolence. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was dreaming. Maybe this was sleep paralysis. But it felt too real. The cold was too sharp, the weight on my chest too heavy. My mind raced. and all I could think was that whatever these things were, they were no longer just passing through. They were here to stay. Just when I thought I couldn't take it any longer, the light flickered back on, and the shadows disappeared. I bolted out of bed, heart racing, and ran to the switch, flicking it on and off to make sure it wasn't broken. It wasn't. The light was working perfectly fine. But I knew that whatever was in my room had control. It could mess with the light, with my sleep, with my mind. I started sleeping with more than just the bedside lamp on. I'd leave the hallway light on, the bathroom light, anything to keep the shadows away. But it didn't matter. They always came back. The closer they got, the more helpless I felt. I didn't know what they wanted or why they were here, but one thing was clear. They weren't going anywhere. They were getting stronger, and I was losing control of my own space. The fear was suffocating. Every night felt like a battle, and I was constantly on edge, waiting for the shadows to return. I tried to act normal during the day, go to work, hang out with friends, but in the back of my mind, I knew what was waiting for me at night. No amount of light could keep them away forever. The shadows became a permanent part of my life. I started avoiding my bedroom entirely, opting to sleep on the couch in the living room with every light in the apartment blazing. At first, I thought this was working. The shadows seemed to stay away. I could finally get a little sleep, even if it wasn't perfect. But it didn't last. One night, I woke up again with that familiar feeling, cold and heavy. The kind of cold that sinks into your bones, making it hard to move. My body felt frozen, and I didn't want to look. But something in me told me that the shadows hadn't stayed away. Slowly, I opened my eyes, just a crack, and there they were, standing in the doorway of the living room. It wasn't just one shadow, or even two. This time, there were 4, maybe 5, all in different shapes and sizes. I could feel their presence filling the room, their dark forms blending into the shadows cast by the lamps. But these weren't normal shadows. They were too dark, too solid, like they were made of something thicker than air. I couldn't see faces, couldn't see eyes, but I knew they were watching me. I could feel the weight of their gaze, and suddenly, the room didn't feel safe anymore. My little haven of light had been invaded. It didn't matter how many lights I had on. It didn't matter if I moved rooms or left the bedroom behind. The shadows were coming with me. They had made up their mind, and there was no place left for me to hide. The worst part wasn't that they were there. It was that I couldn't shake the feeling that they wanted something from me. I just didn't know what. Every time they appeared, they got a little closer, lingered a little longer, like they were waiting for me to do something, or say something. The uncertainty was maddening. That's when I decided to reach out to a medium. I never believed in that kind of stuff before, but at this point, I was willing to try anything. I found someone who specialized in dealing with paranormal attachments, and reluctantly told them my story, expecting them to laugh or brush me off. But they didn't. The medium listened carefully, and after a long pause, told me something I wasn't prepared for. These shadows weren't just random entities. They were attached to me. They had followed me, or rather, I had somehow drawn them in. According to the medium, certain energies, certain people, act as a beacon for these kinds of entities, and for whatever reason, I was one of them. She explained that these shadows weren't malicious in the way I thought they were, but they weren't harmless either. They were drawn to the living, feeding off fear, confusion, and attention. The more I noticed them, the stronger they became, and the more afraid I got, the closer they came. I asked the medium what I could do to get rid of them. She told me that getting rid of them completely might not be possible, but there were ways to weaken their hold. The key was not to give them power. I had to stop feeding into their presence, stop fearing them, stop acknowledging them. Easier said than done when they're standing right in front of you, but I didn't have many options left. I followed the medium's advice as best as I could. It wasn't easy. Every night I would feel that cold, oppressive energy, the weight of their presence, but I forced myself not to look. I'd focus on my breathing, on anything else, telling myself that they were nothing more than shadows, powerless unless I let them in. It's been a few months now, and things have gotten better, at least a little. I still feel them sometimes, especially at night. I still catch glimpses of movement in the corners of my eyes, and that cold feeling hasn't completely gone away. But they don't seem as strong as before. I'm not waking up to them standing over me anymore. At least not every night. I don't think they'll ever truly leave. I've come to accept that they're part of my life now, lingering in the shadows, waiting. I still don't know what they want, or why they chose me, but I've stopped letting them control my life. I guess, in some strange way, I've learned to live with them. Maybe that's the scariest part of all, that sometimes the things that terrify us the most are the things we have to learn to live with. So, what do you think? Are these just shadows, or could they be something more? Do you think they were feeding off my fear, or is there something else going on here? I'm still not sure what to believe, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know if you've ever had an experience like this. Maybe we're not as alone in the dark as we think.